Hi folks, GamerBug here again, and it's time for another Transformers video. What is today's topic? Well, I am once again going to be looking at the G1 toys and the G1 cartoon and see how well the designs stack up against one another. I did this previously when I took the 1984 toy lineup and pitted them against the cartoon, and this video will be focusing on the 1985 lineup instead. If you want to see my thoughts on the 1984 toy lineup, you can watch that video by clicking the link on screen or using the link in the description. In the 1984 comparison video, I used the box art of the toys versus the cartoon artwork, and though it wasn't a bad comparison, it wasn't quite as good as using the actual toys. So for the 1985 matchup, I've decided to use the toys and hope the images I have are of decent enough quality for a fair comparison. But I will also use the box art as a second basis, just to add a bit of extra detail on the toy side of it. What I'm looking for is twofold. One, does the cartoon do a good job of looking like the toys? After all, that was the purpose of the cartoon, to sell more toys. And two, which looks better, the toy design or the cartoon design? Or is it a draw? If you want to know more about the whys, whens and hows of my criteria, then watch the previous 1984 video. But also know that my brain works weird and I will contradict myself left and right. So all in all, this is my opinion and a bit of nostalgic fun. You're going to have different views and that's okay. Before we crack on, just the obligatory message that if you like this video, then please leave a like, and if you aren't yet, then please consider subscribing, as it massively helps the channel and allows me to bring more of this sort of content to you. I'm currently aiming to hit 400 subscribers, and without your help as the viewers, this isn't going to happen. So to everyone who chooses to subscribe, and those who already have, thank you. Right, on with the show, and let's queue up our first candidate, Astro Train. Looking at the cartoon and looking at the toy, and straight away I have to say no, they don't look like one another at all. They look considerably different. The obvious first point being the colour. The colour scheme of each of them. One of them is this grey muted colour and the other is a nice white that really pops. The amount of purple also is more impressive on the toy in my opinion. I don't like the dull grey of Astro Train that they went from the cartoon, and then weirdly enough the actual box art has him in this dull grey as well, but still does a better job than the cartoon does. So no, they don't really do a good job of looking like one another. The box art looks like the missing link between them actually. So not doing a good job of looking like one another, who looks better? Now we know the toy is going to have limited articulation, but this is a still image of the cartoon, so it sort of doesn't matter. And when I look at these, I have to say, I really like the cartoon's colours so much more. They pop more, the white and the purples are just more interesting. I was never a fan of this dull grey look that they gave to Astro Train, and the head is like one of the few things that's purple, and a little bit on the legs looking at this. I have Siege / Earthrise Astro Train, and I also don't really like that figure, again for this boring muted colour scheme. So on this one, I have to give this point definitely to the toy. Beachcomber. This is more of an easy one for me because I think they both do a very good job of looking like one another. Obviously this is more about does the cartoon look like the toy rather than the toy look like the cartoon, because typically one came before the other anyway, which was the toy. But this one, yeah, I think this one does a pretty damn good job of it. There are differences, but they're not massive. Obviously the Autobot symbol on the legs isn't there on the cartoon version. The visor's slightly different. The head is obviously slightly different, but not massively so. All in all, I like both of these and I think they look fine. But if we're taking the box art out of the equation, which is a little bit weird looking, I'm going to have to give this one to the cartoon. It just expands upon that basicness of the toy a little bit better. Blaster. I have to say, this does a pretty good job of looking similar. There's only one massive thing that sticks out, and that is the difference in the face. And they have got the visor kind of there, it's just they haven't got that weird like almost strap across his nose or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I think they do look very similar. So I'm going to give that a thumbs up on this. Which looks better though? And this is tricky because obviously the Blaster toy is quite boxy and very simple. But then if I look at the drawing, it is too. And I think I'm going to give this one to the toy. I think the toy just has something about it that's a bit more interesting than the cartoon. The cartoon's tape deck looks a little bit small, maybe, but I think it's the head. The head on the cartoon version, at least on this picture, and that's all I have to go on at the moment, doesn't look as good, which is weird because I don't like the head on the box art, but the actual head I think is okay, and it's close to a draw, but I think I'm just going to edge this one to the toy. Blitzwing. Does it do a good job of the cartoon looking like the toy? Predominantly, yes. I'd say it's pretty close, and I think it's close enough to give it the thumbs up. But there are differences. You can see there's differences in the forearms being a different colour on the cartoon to the toy, and it's the head. The head has that lighter face. But beyond that, they are really similar. I'm surprised how close the actual toy and the cartoon look like one another, which I think is great. But which looks better? I think this one, it's really hard for me to pick, but I do think the cartoon's brighter face does add quite a bit to this. So for that reason, I think I have to give this one to the cartoon, but only just. Bombshell. Now this is one of them ones where I think this is at best a kind of homage when it comes to the cartoon versus the toy. Yeah, there's a similarity there, but I'm stretching that word out for a reason. And no, I don't think these actually look that similar at all. I think it's due to how crazy and sort of too much going on almost the toy has going for it compared to the simplicity of the cartoon variation. Obviously the colouring is considerably different here as well, and yeah, their heads don't do a bad job, but they're different. I don't think these match at all. So which is better? Well, I'm going to go with the cartoon on this one. Although I do love the box art version of Bombshell, the actual toy itself is a mess, and I've always kind of felt it is a mess. It was one of the problems I had with the most recent releases in Legacy, that they tried to copy the toy a little bit too much, and that probably wasn't a good thing. Maybe if they'd stuck to the cartoon version, it would have been a better... Well, the robot mode was okay, but the alt mode definitely sucked. Anyway, on this one, yeah, it definitely has to go to the cartoon. I don't like that robot mode at all on the toy. Bone Crusher. I thought this one would be kind of easy because I remember when I did my 1985 box art reviews, I thought the box art of most of the Constructicons was kind of really boring and didn't have much detail. And if I'm honest, the cartoon is kind of boring and doesn't have very much detail. But then I look at the toy and go, oh my God, that's crap. And they don't actually look like one another. They look considerably different. And for that reason, I cannot give a point to them looking the same. So which looks better? Well, I'm looking at them both here, and I have to say that though I actually like the box art version of Bone Crusher, the toy itself is quite trash looking. And I'm not a massive fan of this cartoon rendition of him. I certainly do not like the head. I think the head looks better on the box art. But this is not about the box art. This is about cartoon versus toy. The box art's just an extra little thing in the back there. So on this, I definitely have to give it to the cartoon because it looks way better than the toy that's just too basic for words. Cosmos. Yeah, I can see a resemblance again, but it really is a really distant resemblance here. I don't think these look that convincingly alike at all. So this is a no. Why? Because the head is too tall, the look on the arms, the way the hands are, the feet, everything. I know it's a toy, but it just does not look like that toy. There's just too much detail in that cartoon version. The cartoon version does do a pretty damn good job of looking like the box art, but we're not using the box art, as I say, apart from for a reference. So no, these do not look like one another. And which is better? Well, it's no secret I hated the toy of Cosmos. I thought it was trash. Even as a kid, a friend of mine had it, didn't like it, thought it was stupid. It was a UFO. What's disguisey about a UFO? I do really like this cartoon though. It really looks cool and chunky and fun. And this reminds me of the legacy version of Cosmos, which I do really like. I don't know why, I have some sort of endearment for that, and I think it looks great. So this one, yeah, this is going to the cartoon without a shadow of a doubt. Devastator. This is a tricky one. It does sort of look like the same thing when you look at the toy and you look at the cartoon image. But I think it's the fact that the toy looks so kind of naff and the cartoon just sort of lifts that up. I don't know if I can say they look similar. Not similar enough. There's too many things I think maybe the cartoon does better. Is that fair? I don't know. I mean, looking at the legs are right, yes. The arms are okay. They've got black on the arms rather than purple. I'm going to say yes. I'm giving this a yes on looking like one another. I'm probably going to hate myself for doing that though. That said, I still think the cartoon looks way, way better. I'm not even looking at the box art. The box art was trash. I hated it in the box art video I did. But looking at the head and how it's attached, it looks kind of odd, and I don't know what the thing sticking out the head is. And yeah, I don't like the toy at all. This one's definitely going to the cartoon. And I'm not saying the cartoon's a brilliant picture, but it's way better. Dirge. So I have to be a little bit stringent here, and I'm going to say that the toy does not look like the cartoon and vice versa, because the toy was never meant to be a cone head. That was something that came in after the fact of the toy being released. The toy, as per the box art and the picture I've got up here, was always just meant to have the cone going backwards, the same as Starscream, Skywarp, Thundercracker. So it's not a cone head. The cone heads, as they were introduced, had a much shorter cone head, and so they don't, because if you flip the cone up, it looks absolutely ridiculous on the toy. So no, they don't look alike, because that's true. They just don't for that reason. Other than that, not bad, but no. Which is better though? Well, I don't really like the cone head look. I've never liked it. It's my own fault as to this, but the reason I don't have the new Seekers, for want of a better word, in my collection, I do have Dirge now, is because I skipped out on them, going, I don't want those, they're the cone heads. I don't like the cone heads. Little did I realise how hard they would be to get hold of in future when I finally decided my collection was to be a certain thing, thus I needed them. So now I'm praying for those re-releases, which I know Dirge has got and Ramjet's got one coming up, and hopefully Thrust will happen in future. So that said, I don't like the cone heads, so I'm giving this one to the toy because I just prefer that look. And yeah, that's my main reason, so it goes to the toy. Grapple. I think this isn't bad. I think this is pretty good. It's pretty close. If I was to pick a real problem with this, it's that the head should be black rather than orange. But that's it. That's pretty much it. I will say the cartoon makes Grapple look a little bit tubbier than both the box art and, if I'm honest, the actual toy looks. But it does other things well. So it's kind of a hard one to pick which I think looks better here, the cartoon or the toy. But I think that black head is better, and he does look more slim here. So as much as I kind of want to call this a draw, I'm not, and I'm going to give this one to the toy. Grimlock, leader of the Dinobots. Do they look the same? And they don't. The cartoon version is way more stylized, and the toy version is very basic and very limited. It's interesting how bad the toy kind of actually looks when you see it. Not talking about the dinosaur mode, obviously we're talking about the robot mode here. Now, we can't use that absolutely phenomenal box art to do anything about this, but even if we did, I still don't think they look that similar. They changed the head on the cartoon of Grimlock and all sorts, so they don't look like one another. Which looks better? Well, I don't like this cartoon picture specifically, but it's the best one I could find. But it does look better. It looks way better. I think that the toy is just so kind of dated, and the head being sat that far back, and there are things about it I kind of like, and certain parts of how they've really toned down the detail on the cartoon Grimlock. But this has to go to cartoon Grimlock. He does look better. Hoist. Hoist. one of my childhood toys. I love this guy, even though he was not the greatest toy, but I didn't have a massive collection of Transformers as a kid, and so having this one made all the difference to me. Do they look like one another? Well, if we take that box art out of the equation, which is phenomenal, by the way, I love it, then yes, they do. Neither of them look like the box art, but they both do look like each other. Their head is a different colour, sure, but that's probably the only thing. Even the shape of it is right. Yeah, you could argue maybe the cartoon looks a bit tubbier, but it doesn't look like Hoist the Toy's not exactly been sneaking Energon snacks. They hit everything pretty much right. Yeah, there's white on the cartoon and there's silver on the toy, but it's hard to do silver in a cartoon. So yeah, I think they look like one another. Which looks better? Now this is a tricky one because I don't think either look great. And the more I look back without the rose-tinted nostalgia at Toy Hoist, he wasn't great. And if I'm honest, neither is my latest version, it's Earthrise Hoist, but he's fine. And the cartoon's fine. And I think I'd be doing a disservice here, and I think this is the first one. I'm gonna call this a draw because they both look good, but not brilliant. Just good. Hook. Now, minor things aside, just mainly the feet, I actually think the cartoon and the toy have done a really good job of trying to look like one another. And that's a good thing. Yeah, there's a red visor rather than a blue visor, although he looks kind of more silver on the toy. I'm obviously looking at the box art at the same time. But I like this. I don't think the box art actually does as good a job of representing than the toy does and the cartoon does of one another. So yeah, they look like each other. Which looks better? I think that I like them both, actually. It's a little bit trickier to say which looks best. Obviously, you've got more articulation in that cartoon because you can have, but I think the legs are really lacking on that. And I like them a little bit more on the toy. And I like the box art even more so. But I think I'm giving this one to the toy, actually. Only just, but it's going to the toy. Inferno. One of my favourite toys as a kid. I owned him. He was my second in command of my collection of Transformers to Optimus Prime. And when Optimus died, he was going to become Infernus Prime. Screw Rodimus. But that obviously never happened, apart from in my head. But do they look like one another? And if I give it to Grapple, I think I have to give it to these guys. They do a pretty damn good job of looking like one another. There are differences, but subtle enough. But subtle enough for me to choose which one I prefer the look of as well. And that is that the toy doesn't look as chunky as this particular cartoon version. He looks a little bit too squat, takes away from the heroism, makes him look more fun and cuddly. So yeah, the toy's all business. He's going to be your next Optimus Prime. Honestly, he is. That's my decision. So yeah, toy definitely wins on this one. Jetfire. Well, it's pretty obvious they don't look the same, do they? I mean, in any way, shape or form, with the exception of colouring, and I don't even mean the way it is upon them, just that they are red and white. Nah, totally different. So that out of the way, which do I prefer? Now, obviously, I like them both. And that Jetfire / Skyfire was what was in the comics. It was what was in the cartoons. It's what I have as part of my Siege collection, albeit he's got the face mask on because I love the face mask. So which do I prefer? The toy. Every day of the week. Yes, I know it's from Macross or whatever, and a friend of mine had the Macross, a grey version of this without all the extra armour bits on it, and another friend actually had Jetfire. And I loved them both, and they were brilliant. They were just the most articulated toys I'd ever come across compared to Transformers, which were not. And they were brilliant. And I still think it looks freaking brilliant. It does. I do really like the cartoon Jetfire, but the toy is just amazing, and the toy wins. Kickback. So looking at these two, I would say, compared to Bombshell especially, they actually do a pretty good job of looking like one another. The yellow chest plate, the head, the wings, the legs, pretty good. The biggest differences are the red visor and the black visor. And I'm not going to colour a visor. I'm not going to put points against the person for. and the clamp arms, which has never really been continued moving forward, and I was never a fan of anyway. I'm going to say yes. Yes, they do look similar. But which looks better? Well, again, we're not allowed to use that box art, and they're both okay, but as much as it's sort of simplified on the cartoon definitely wins here. The toy isn't great. So yeah, cartoon gets the thumbs up. Longhorn. This is a weird one because they really don't look like one another, but you can see similarities. But I have to say no on this one, I think. The head, though I said I'm not going to penalise for different colours too much, it's just too different. One feels like a face, the cartoon basically feels like it's a face attached to a block, whereas the other looks like it's a head with a flat panel behind. So that's quite different. The different colours, I don't know why they've gone for black. They could have easily done the purple. They've not done a bad job with the legs, but they could have had a little bit more detail and stuff into it. And again, it's very simplified in that cartoon version. So I don't think they look similar enough. Which looks better though? This is a hard one because I don't really like either of them. I think the toy has its benefits, and I think that the cartoon has its benefits, but I think neither is good. The box art is the best one, but that's not allowed to win. So I think I'm going to give this one, probably just because the toy's too simple and boring and naff looking. I'm going to give it to the cartoon, but it was close. Mixmaster. I don't think these two look alike. I really don't. I think the differences are considerable between these two. Again, if you look at the box art as a bit of inspiration, you can see the differences if it were to be more articulated. But when you look at the toy, when you look at the cartoon's just so basic, so simplistic that the toy, it just has too much detail and flair to it that they don't look the same. So which looks better? Is it that more simplistic look for the cartoon, or is it the more flair, as I just said, from the toy? And well, cartoon is just too basic. The wheels could have been visible, but they're not. The head is nowhere near as cool as the toy version, and that's a downside. The little gun things on the top above the head, kind of a helmet, I guess, don't like that. It's just too boring. It's really, really boring. And I think, without a shadow of a doubt, the toy is so much more exciting here. So it goes to the toy. Omega Supreme. Now, I don't actually remember Omega Supreme in the cartoon, but I got this image, so I'm going to talk about them anyway. For all I know, this might be fan art in the style of the cartoon, and if it is, it is. But looking at these, obviously the head is massively different, but the rest of him is pretty much the same. So can I say that because the face, and it's a face, sorry, not the head, the face is so different, is that a good enough reason? And no, I don't think they do a bad job of looking like one another. You're not going to forget one or the other. You're going to go, that is the same thing. Could have been a little bit better, maybe the Autobot symbol a bit higher up, but then there is the blackout one lower down. I think I'm nitpicking. I think they look like one another, except the head. But if that was a visor was, you couldn't see the face that's weirdly underneath, I think they'd be really good. It's no secret I hate, by the way, the box art. I think it looks rubbish. But which of these looks better, the toy or the cartoon? And I don't really like that face on the cartoon, and it's hard to not see it. Also, the arms look too short. He doesn't look that powerful. As a matter of fact, he doesn't look like a big towering kind of base monster thing that he is. Base monster, I don't know where I've got that from. But the toy does. So this one, yeah, the toy just looks more Titan-esque. Perceptor. Well, the head's obviously different, but it's literally just the visor, and well, I guess the eyes are different as well. The face is different, probably the best way of putting it. The face is definitely different on these. Yeah, the obviously the magnifying glass on the shoulder is bigger on one than the other, but that's an artistic thing. And the colorings are lighter on the toy and darker on the cartoon. But I think if you bought the toy, you'd feel you didn't get a bad representation of the cartoon. So I'm going to say yes, they look like one another. As for which looks better, Obviously, I like me a visored and face masked robot face. I don't know on this one. There's a lot to love about the Perceptor that we all know from the cartoon, but there's also a coolness to the toy, and I think it's the head that would take it A from B, and that would be the winning thing, and I don't think that's enough on this. So I'm going to give this one a draw. Powerglide. I mean, no, they don't look the same because of the legs. Is that me being too pernickety? I don't think it is. I think that the feet and the legs in general are really different from that cartoon picture and from the cartoon look, as are the hands that come out and look different. The face is the same. I'll give the wings and stuff and that. I'll give it that. But the legs are just too different. I'm going to say no on this one. Do I prefer the cartoon? Do I prefer the toy? I was never a fan of the Powerglide toy anyway, so that puts it already in a bit of a problem. The box art's awful, don't like it, so that's not really anything. It's neither here nor there, just a point. But you know what? I like this cartoon picture of him. I think he looks okay. I still wish Powerglide was not a Autobot. I think I'd rather he was a Decepticon. I just don't like the plain Autobot thing, because Autobot, I always wanted them to be cars and car related stuff. But I like this cartoon picture and I don't like the toy, so it's cartoon definitely. Ramjet. Well, if I'm honest, everything I said about Dirge is the same on Ramjet. I don't think they look the same because the toy was never meant to be a cone head. This is a cone head. The cones, even if you flip the thing up, are shorter. So no, I don't think they look the same for that reason. And that's probably enough. Which do I prefer? Well, I don't like the cone heads. I've already said that before, so I'm going to pick the toy. There we go. Let's move on. Red Alert. I'm just going to point out I really hated the box art of Red Alert first, before I then go on to say, wow, both the cartoon and the toy pull it back, don't they? Because they look great. And do they look like one another? Well, I'll tell you what, change that black head to red. Yeah, they do. And do I like them? Yeah, I do. They both look really, really good. There's so much about this to love. And both look really cool. I don't know if I prefer the black head to the red head. It's tricky. I have a real difficulty picking which of these I prefer more. And so for that reason, I'm going to give a draw on this one. I like them both equally. Scavenger. You know what? This is pretty close. They've done a really good job here. Obviously, there's less detail on the legs on the cartoon version, but they've got the kind of scoop at the back. The gun's pretty close. The head's good. Obviously, slightly different in the eye styling. They've got that bit on the front there. Yeah, I think these look the same. Better of the two? I don't know here. They are very similar. And I think the toy just has a little bit more spark about it. It's not the most bland of cartoon pictures, but it's not as good as a toy, I think. So I'm giving this one to the toy. Scrapper. Like Scavenger before, I think this is pretty good. I'd say the biggest problem here is the lack of wheels on the shoulders. That's kind of it. Again, the scoops on the back, the legs look good. They've even got the wheels on the cartoon for once on the bottom. Gun looks good. Head, different colour visor, but that's about it. I like both of these. I like both of these a lot. So not only do they match, but I'm going to actually say that I'm calling this one a draw. They both look really good. Sea Spray. Again, I think they've done a pretty good job here. I mean, Sea Spray is quite a basic design and the cartoon's quite a basic picture, so it was hard to get them too wrong, and they haven't. I think they've done well with the face. I think they've done well with the body. The legs, yeah, obviously slightly different. Probably could have been a bit bigger, the actual feet. But besides that, I think really good. So yes, they look like one another. But which looks better? I don't know again. I like the kind of chunkiness of the cartoon picture, and obviously there's a bit more detail on that, but they are so close it's hard to pick. I think if the feet would have been a bit bigger on the cartoon version, just to match up, not huge, but bigger, I think I would have gone for the cartoon version. And I did quite like Sea Spray. The actual toy was one I enjoyed playing with as a kid, but I think I'm going to go for a draw again here. I like them both. I just think they both look great. So a draw. Shockwave. This was one of those elusive toys as a kid because I don't know anywhere that actually sold it. I do remember a knockoff version of this though, probably called like Laser Gun Man or something like that. And I think it was grey or something, sold in a local shop. Did not have that. I just remember seeing it in the shop. Anyway, do they look like one another? And I think apart from some proportions, yeah, they do actually. I think they do a pretty damn good job. Yeah, the legs are too skinny on the toy. But other than that, I think pretty good. Do I prefer the cartoon? Do I prefer the toy version? This one's pretty easy. The cartoon version is iconic and looks brilliant. He looks more stocky. He just looks more menacing. The toy's fine, but it's better than the Megatron toy, which I thought was really naff. But it is too spindly looking. It doesn't look as cool. So no, it's fine, but the cartoon's just amazing and looks brilliant. Shrapnel. You know what? I think it's a little bit of squatness on the toy aside, and that's not to say that the actual cartoon version's lanky. Yeah, these actually do a really good job of looking similar to one another. Yeah, there's the red visor. I'm not deducting points for that. But you know, the mandibles, the arms look very similar. The legs look very similar. Yeah, these match up. Which looks better though? Well, I'm not a fan of Shrapnel, full stop. I don't think it's a great toy either way. I don't even like the new Legacy version of him much. But if I had to pick out of these, I just have to give it to the cartoon, barely. They're very similar, so that's maybe a little unfair, but I think this one's going to have to go to the cartoon. It just looks a little bit more interesting. Skids. I guess they do look similar. I mean, the colours are right. Even the sort of stance of that isn't far off. Heads may be a little different, but not enough. I think these do a pretty good job of looking like one another. So yeah, they tick that box. Which looks better, however? I'm not a fan really of either. If you were to ask me on the box art would go yes and win. So this makes this a bit trickier. Looking at them side by side, I can see pluses and minuses on both of them, but I am going to give this to the toy. I think the toy just has a little bit more pizzazz about it, whereas I think the cartoon just looks like kind of generic. I think it's the head. I'm just about giving this one to the toy, but it was close. Slag. Yeah, they're pretty good. They're pretty close. I think there's more detailing and stuff going on in the toy though, and you can see the legs a bit more, like the dinosaur legs and stuff. And the box obviously does a good job of showing this off as well. Obviously the heads are different, and I do prefer the black head over the red head that the cartoon has. Both do a good job of looking like one another. I think I'm going to say yes, just about on that. Which looks better? I think the toy does look better because I preferred that sort of black face and actually seeing the legs of the dinosaur on it, seeing how it transformed a bit more. I think I prefer that slightly. I do love the Studio Series version of Slag that I've got, but I think if it had had more this look of the toy, I would have preferred it. So I'm giving this one to the toy. Sludge. I don't know if these do a good enough job of looking like one another. I think they kind of do. Now this picture's a little bit weird to me and it looks a bit modern, so maybe I've not got a proper G1 version of him here. Maybe it's fan art. If it is, let me know. I apologise if it is. It's the best picture I could find at the time. The heads are different, but other than that, it's not bad. I might give it a pass on looking like each other. I'm probably being a bit too fair on it, but I'll give it a pass. Which looks better? I don't like this cartoon look here at all. Like I say, maybe it is like fan art, maybe it's from a more modern iteration, but I just don't like it at all. And I think for that reason, I have to go for the toy here. It just looks better to me. Smokescreen. Do they look similar? Yeah, I think they do. I think comparing this to Prowl and Blue Streak, the cartoon version, they definitely tried to get a bit more of the car detailing going on here, especially on the legs. And I think for that reason alone, yes, they match up. They look well. I didn't get a picture of the cannons on the shoulders, but yeah, I think this is pretty good. Yeah, okay, he doesn't have the 38 on his chest. He has an Autobot symbol, but I think that might be the image I managed to get hold of a Smokescreen here, so that might be my problem. I think that if you just look at the box art, they also do a very good job of looking like one another. Box art look cooler. So yeah, I think they look like one another. Which looks better? Like I say, I may have got a slightly not correct toy version of Smokescreen here, but for that reason, I think the cartoon does look better than the toy here. Again, we're not using the box art, which looks amazing. So I'm giving this one to the cartoon. Snarl. Again, I don't really know if the cartoon picture is a correct one. Something about it feels a bit less like the actual G1 cartoon, but maybe that's just the way I'm looking at it. But that's all I've got. And then with that being all that I've got to go on, do they look like one another? Ooh, I don't know. The box art and the cartoon do look quite similar. The toy and this cartoon picture, I don't know, not so much. I'm gonna give it a pass just based on maybe these are slightly wackier pictures. That seems fair. Which do I prefer though? I never was a big fan of the Snarl toy. I mean, again, if we were going by box art, yes, definitely. But it's okay. I think I'm going to give this to the toy. But if you ask me on another day, maybe I might swap them around. So, toy wins just here. Swoop. As much as I say colours don't make a difference, they have to make a difference here. I never felt like cartoon Swoop looked anything like the toy Swoop. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but they don't look like one another. Let's get that out of the way. Which looks better though? Again, box art's really nice. I think it's cool. The toy of Swoop is fine, but the cartoon's just so much better. It just looks so much cooler. I don't care that there's a visor on the toy. Yeah, the cartoon's just great. I think it looks brilliant, and I think the toy's good. The cartoon just blows it out of the water. Cartoon wins here. Thrust. Well, everything that we said about Dirge and Ramjet also applies to Thrust. They don't look the same because their heads are wrong, yada yada yada. Go back and watch that bit. I will say that something about the cartoon version of Thrust looks a little bit better than the toy version, and I think it's the wings look less bulky. They just look like there's way too much going on the toy version. But I think maybe that's just how they're situated. And can you sweep them back a bit more? I don't know. That does put me off a little bit. So for the last one of these guys, I'm actually just going to edge it towards Thrust because he looks a little bit better than the mess that the toy looks. So I'll give it to this cartoon here. Tracks. I'm looking at these two and I'm also looking at the box art, and I have to say, I love the box art. It looks awesome, but the box art looks nothing like the cartoon or the toy. Whereas the toy and the cartoon don't do a bad job. Colours differences, notwithstanding, of looking like one another. And so they get the thumbs up on, do they do a good job of representing one another? They do. Which looks better? It's not the best picture of the toy, and it's kind of hard to see it. And the cartoon is a really good picture and looks really good. I think if I got a better picture of the toy, maybe the toy might be able to pull a few points back here, but without it, and I'm going to go with what's in front of me, I think the cartoon does look better. I think I would rather have seen that cooler face, but beyond that, no, I'm going to pick the cartoon here. I think it just looks cooler. Warpath. The major differences here are how the head flips up, which is a nitpick, I think, and the way that the treads are on the feet. And also somewhat the size of the turret. Now you have to remember that on the box art they tried to make that feet that are stuck together like one big, set of treads look the same. And obviously they didn't do that on the cartoon. And I think that's not enough of a reason. If you split that straight down the middle on the toy, it would look a lot closer. And I never liked that anyway. So yeah, I think they do look like one another enough. Which looks better? This is hard because I don't like either of them. I think they both look kind of naff. I think the toy looks naffer because of the whole stylization of it. So I have to give this to the cartoon. I do think the most recent, was it Earthrise or Kingdom version of him looked brilliant, but I'm not a huge fan of either of these. The cartoon edges it. So the final one definitely goes to the cartoon. Finally, we are at the end of our exhaustive list of Transformers, and the scores are in. They're tighter than I thought they would be. In the previous video, the cartoon kind of ran away with it, but I think maybe that's because I was using the box art, so the nostalgia was probably less. And some of the box art's very stylized and cool, so it's going to do well. And some of the box art is naff, so it's going to do poorly. I did try to think of the toys at the same time, but that makes it trickier. Here, however, we just used the toys. Yeah, we had the box art as like an extra reference, but we were just using the toys. And when we did that, yeah, I think things became maybe more unique and interesting, and the nostalgia definitely probably kicked in a bit harder. So I was going to give the toys maybe a bit more benefit. So all in all, yeah, the cartoon won out, but only just with 22 to 20. What was even more impressive, I think, is how many I felt looked the same. And that was quite a lot. But I'm also fully aware that maybe my criteria went all over the place as I was doing this video, which is not unsurprising for me. I think if I went back and looked at it, there's probably some that I harshly judged that maybe I would say looked more like another. And there might be points where there's some that you would literally look at and go, what are you talking about? Of course they look like one another. And I get it. And you're allowed to have your opinions. I'm allowed to have mine. And if this was a Tuesday rather than a Thursday, who knows what I would have said. By the way, I don't even think it's Thursday. What day is it? Doesn't matter. So yes, if I went back, I might change my mind, but as it stands, I thought a lot of them did do a good job of representing the toys. When you watch that cartoon and then you get the toy, you want to be able to play what you just watched, and having them be so different can really kill your immersion as a kid. So I'm really happy this is how it turned out, and I'm kind of glad it was close, because I always thought the cartoon probably would come out on top, even though they have a much more simplified look to them. But obviously the toys are simplified in what they're capable of doing, and that kind of always pulls those back a bit as well. But for my nostalgia, my love of these things, having them be so close is actually a big thumbs up. But what did you think? Did you agree with me? Am I crazy? Let me know in the comments below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please do leave a like, and subscribing, as mentioned before, really helps me get to that 400 subscribers point. Other than that, as always, thank you for watching, and until next time, GamerBug out.